safety and you taking care of yourselves and what habits you have. Now, if you use drugs or alcohol, obviously if you do harm to others, you need to be penalized. You need to be in prison or whatever. But if somebody is using drugs and the government comes in and causes all this harm, this is a different problem. I, for one, think drugs are very, very dangerous. As a matter of fact, not only do I think the so-called illegal drugs are dangerous, I think the legal drugs are very dangerous too. I happen to think that there's too many. But you know, there is one area of drug usage which opens the door more to a better understanding, and that is the states that want to and have legalized the medical use of marijuana. Same category as freedom of choice, or you deciding whether or not that might help a person medically, as I would say that you ought to have the right to make your own decision on whether or not you want to drink raw milk. Who's to protect us from ourselves? It is only us that can do that. Everything that we do, every habit we do, everything that we eat, drink, smoke, or whatever, it is up to us. It's up to us also to teach our children or the doctors or the community trying to instruct and show where the danger is. But to say that the nanny state will solve our problems and let the government and the bureaucrats and the regulators spend $3 trillion in the last 40 years and have no success, it's time to call it off. It's time to call it off. This idea of legalizing freedom, because they might misuse their freedom, and then they'll say, well, if they misuse their freedom, then they will become a ward of the state. Well, maybe that's the problem, because if you alone suffer the consequences of making mistakes, it's a lot different than if you become a ward of the state. You can go to your neighbor, your government, and say, you take care of me because, you know, I didn't wear a helmet, and therefore you have to take care of me, and that's when you depend on the government to solve all our problems. But the whole idea, though, is allowing us the right to our life. We know where our liberties come from. We know where our life comes from. We certainly ought to have the right to deal with the fruits of our labor and keep the fruits of our labor. Somebody along the way philosophically took something that the founders gave us, and that was a unified concept of liberty. That economic liberty and personal liberty is one and the same because it's right to your life. So now we have some people mildly defending economic liberty in a very confused manner, and another group poorly defending the rights of individuals to run their life as they choose. But it's one and the same. If you have a right to your life, you have a right to your social values, your church values, and all your habits that you do, and you have a right to keep your money and spend the money that you have, waste your money if you want to, but the consequence then only falls on you. But if you turn those responsibilities over to the government and the bureaucrats, it costs you a lot of money, and they don't solve the problem one bit. So I don't have very much faith or confidence. That I think is so wonderful about this message is that if you understand liberty, all of a sudden it brings diversity, it removes diversity, or brings diverse people together, not because they want to use their liberties exactly the same way. We don't all want to go to the same church. We don't all want to read the same books. We shouldn't all want to have enforcement of our same habits, and we shouldn't have the government enforcing us how to spend our own money. So the problem, though, is some people will say, yeah, I like this idea to a certain degree, but sometimes people just abuse these personal liberties, and they practice bad habits, and we have to take care of them and prevent them from hurting themselves. What they're saying is they think that if you're allowed to make your own own choice and you make a choice that they don't like, that you've endorsed what they do. But that's not the case. If somebody takes the First Amendment and they practice a certain religion or no religion, that doesn't mean you endorse what they do. In the same way with economic liberty. People might spend their money one way or waste their money, but you don't endorse what they do, but what you do is you have to tolerate what they do.
Yes.
Why this is a magnificent message is all of a sudden, all this divisiveness in government, the divisiveness has been there generally for a long time. This group wanting power and passing on the loot against this group. But now we're broke. So now the fighting is getting very tense. That's why they don't even bring budgets up anymore, because there's nothing there to budget and we're not producing anything. So if we recognize that the government doesn't have anything to pass out and we're going to remove their power, then we have to bring people together. It's the issue of liberty that should bring us together. And that means that people who want to use their liberty in one way versus another way, while we should come together and we all agree that liberty is the issue, the freedom of choice of deciding what we eat, drink, how we spend our money, always we should come together and then we're all friends, not because we want to have the same kind of life, but we can come together because we understand and believe that people can come together and make the country a lot less divisive. Another thing that has to happen, this concept of individual liberty really has to be individual. And we use hyphenated Americans too often. If we understand what true liberty is, it's because you're an individual, not because you belong to any group. Of course, if you follow this through, you can't penalize anybody in a group because they belong to a group. They can't have unfair passage of laws or enforcement of the law because they belong to a certain group. But they should also not get privileges either because you belong to a certain group. You should have the responsibility of the individual and have the incentive and the responsibility to take care of oneself. And I believe that is the best road to peace and prosperity, and not by the government being involved in the collection of all these taxes and pretending that they can fairly distribute this and take care of everybody, and it ends up in a dogfight. And that's what we're in today. That is what we have to stop. Is that we drift a long way from the concept of a republic and the concept of individual rights, because we now essentially have almost pure democracy. And pure democracy means that you can get a collection of individuals, 51%, you can remove the rights from the others, so the minority doesn't get protected. But the other thing that annoys me about that is we are going about the world pretending that we can police the world and go into nation building and spread our democratic values and American exceptionalism. We go in there and we cause a war, we take it over and say, you're going to have elections just like we have elections. Then sometimes we get to that point, they have an election, and they elect the wrong people, and we don't like them, so we won't accept the election. So I have an answer for that. Why don't we just mind our own business and keep our nose? By the founders that democracy was dangerous, and they claimed that democracy essentially wastes and it consumes to the point where it self-destructs. Now, we've been wasting and we've been consuming. We're in big debt. We have a currency that has no value. There's a false illusion of trust in our money. So we're at this point that we waste and have consumed. But the third stage, they said, was self-destruct. And I'm afraid we're on the verge of that. That is why we must get ready rather quickly to know what we're going to put in place, because if we don't change the people's attitude, they're not going to replace it with liberty. They're going to say what we need are more tyrants in Washington and more rules and regulations. They're still arguing today that the reason that we had the Depression as well as this recent recession, we didn't have enough regulations on the economy, and we didn't have the Federal Reserve regulating things quite well enough. But to tell you the truth, they're going to self-destruct. Economic law is more powerful than anything else, and ideas are more powerful than governments, and we know that. And we can be certain our time has come. It's been the ideas of liberty have remained dormant for quite a few years, but they're alive and well and growing rapidly. And there's a whole new generation that's joining a remnant that remembers about it, had written about it, and have left a legacy for us. So we can look to that legacy, look to that remnant as the young people come in, and we can change this country. There is no in the 1960s, as the Vietnam War was going on, we were having, a lot of terrible problems at that time. And the nation was even more divided today, but it was more clear-cut, liberals versus conservatives. I'm trying to change that to show that it's liberty versus tyranny. In the 1960s, there was a saying that if you weren't a liberal when you were 20, you didn't have a heart, you didn't care about people. But then they said if you were 40 and you weren't a conservative, you didn't have a brain. And I have a suggestion. Why can't you have a heart and a brain and change this system? I think that is what's happening. We're fortunate in that we have great traditions. We're unfortunate that a lot of people in this country, especially those people I know in Washington, they don't know you exist yet, and they haven't heard from us yet. That's why they have to hear from us, because they will continue to manipulate the system. But the message is loud and clear, and that's what we need to do. Now, our traditions are pretty darn good. I use the word cautiously about American exceptionalism because it's been grossly distorted. The neoconservatives claim that we're an exceptional nation and we have this moral obligation to force our way on everybody, on people, and on the marketplace, and on foreign governments because we are such a great nation. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of great things about this country, especially in the past, about prosperity and individual liberty. But the best way to spread our exceptionalism that we have and can have is to set a good standard and make the world want to emulate us and not use force. That is one thing that has to be rejected in a free society, is the use of force. If you can force other people what to do, it is no longer a free society. Then if you grant this power to government, this use of force becomes very dangerous. And I think the rule that Bastiat gave us in the law is a very good rule. Bastiat simply said that if you and I can't do it to each other, that is, I can't take your car, I can't go into your house, I can't spy on you, the government shouldn't be allowed to do it either.